Yemen is home to some of the world's most extraordinary ancient sites, most of which remain largely unknown to the public. In my previous episode, we explored the ancient city of Timna, with its granite cyclopean walls that bear striking similarities to Peru's Coricancha and other megalithic sites around the globe. Today, we'll shift our focus to the sites that Yemen is better known for, the Awwam and Barran temples of Marib, both candidates for UNESCO World Heritage status, as well as the Old Marib Dam, a 600-meter-long ancient engineering masterpiece that once sustained an oasis nearly twice the size of New York City. We'll discuss the remarkable engineering behind these structures, uncover some of their deeper mysteries, and examine their dating. I suspect they could be far older than the conventional timelines suggest. To set the stage properly, though, I'm going to start by discussing a much lesser known but much more deeply studied site, the ancient city of Yadhil, also called Baraqish. The reason we're starting with Baraqish is because it has seen one of the most comprehensive excavation efforts in Yemeni history, including coring, carbon dating, and full restoration. Its similarities with the more famous Awwam and Barran temples will provide valuable insights as we explore and analyze Yemen's other ancient sites. Located in southwest Yemen, about 150 kilometers northwest of Marib, Baraqish was once the key hub among the ancient incense route. It's among the best preserved ancient cities in the country, sitting atop an oval-shaped artificial mound encircled by a remarkably well-preserved ancient wall. This fortification features 56 towers and rises up to 14 meters or nearly 50 feet high. Between 1989 and 2008, the Italian archaeological mission carried out fieldwork here. Prior to their arrival, only the wall and the tops of the massive stone pillars from 3 pre-Islamic temples could be seen above the sand and debris. Once digging commenced, what was uncovered was really incredible. The team unearthed 3 temples built from large, precisely hewn and fitted limestone blocks. Each entrance included a platform with steps on 3 sides, supporting monumental pillars that stood 6 meters or almost 20 feet in height. Inside, additional pillars divided the hypostyle hall into separate naves. These naves housed monolithic offering tables, each about 3 meters long, adorned with rows of crouching ibexes, a motif you might recall from my video on Ethiopia's Temple of Yeha. I'll discuss this more later. Between 2003 and 2004, one temple underwent complete restoration. I'm always struck at the effort required to reconstruct these ancient temples. Massive cranes and crews of people were needed to move these monumental blocks of limestone back into their original position. It always makes me wonder how our ancient builders accomplished similar feats millennia ago. What tools, technology, or methods did they use? The restored temple, along with accompanying archaeological illustrations, provides us with a better sense of its original appearance. If you look closely, it's fairly easy to see multiple construction phases of these structures. The core structure consists of massive limestone blocks forming the columns, floors, and ceilings, and the outer walls are made of tightly interlocked stones without mortar. However, surrounding the temple and its upper sections, the stonework grows smaller and less refined, eventually giving way to mud brick. This progression indicates the site was reused across countless generations, potentially thousands of years, before its eventual abandonment. So how far back does Baraqish date? At most sites, like Timna from our last episode, dating relies on pottery and other artifacts and inscriptions. But at Baraqish, the team conducted a 3-year drilling program and excavated several very deep trenches to probe below the temple's foundations. One trench reached 5 meters, or around 15 feet, beneath the temple base, yet it still encountered large foundation blocks and rows of stone masonry. Despite drilling to their equipment's limits, they never hit virgin soil or bedrock. As the lead archaeologist noted, the drilling has presented a different picture at Baraqish. All in all, we are floating with our temple in superficial levels. Another team member wrote in his diary, "Baraqish is ancient indeed." And what did these samples yield in terms of dating? The oldest radiocarbon dates were 1270 BC, from a fire feature between a dry stone wall and a mud brick one outside the temple. Still, I believe Baraqish could predate 1300 BC. For one, the excavations never reached undisturbed ground beneath the temples. Even at 7 meters down, stone masonry persisted. And unfortunately, digging inside the temples halted before they were able to discover and date any earlier layers deep below the temples. Recall the Temple of Timna from the series opener. It features similar limestone elements atop a far larger, more ancient granite foundation. I've included some side-by-side photos here to illustrate some of the parallels. The pillar bases at Baraqish match those at Timna's uppermost level, with comparable limestone construction and temple layouts. But Timna's temple sits on massive underlying granite blocks. Is it possible that Baraqish had a similar structure that has not yet been discovered underneath these temples? Judging by the site's great depth, I think that's a real possibility. In the head archaeologist's words, the overarching notion to be retained and retold is that Baraqish had a great depth and great antiquity. With that foundation laid, let's now look at the incredible ancient sites around Marib. We're going to discuss the three relatively famous ancient sites of Yemen, all centered around Old Marib, another town built on an ancient man-made hill and, according to legend, the capital of the Sabaean kingdom ruled by the biblical Queen of Sheba. The Awwam and Barran temples and the Old Marib Dam, all UNESCO World Heritage candidates. First up is the Awwam Temple. The temple was partially excavated in 1951 and 52 by Wendell Phillips, whom you may remember from my Timna video. When Phillips began his work at this site, only the tops of the temple's 8 pillars and top sections of the oval wall were visible. Workers painstakingly cleared vast quantities of sand and debris, revealing a large hall lined with pillars, stairways, and numerous inscriptions. Tribal conflicts abruptly ended the expedition, preventing Phillips' return. Nearly half a century later, in 1998, Yemen's government invited his sister, Marilyn Phillips Hodgson, to resume the work, which continued for 9 years. Finally, from 1997 to 2001, the German Institute of Archaeology completed excavations there before it became too dangerous to continue work in Yemen. And what was uncovered through this work was the largest known temple complex in Yemen, spanning about 5,100 square meters. You should recognize some of its features from the temples we just discussed. On the east side of the site is a monumental main entrance with 8 pillars leading to a rectangular hall. This hall had 32 pillars encircling a vast courtyard that measures 110 meters by 75 meters. An annex on the northeast side included paved passages and stairways. Behind the temple is a 10-meter-high wall that enclosed an open-air oval precinct, originally accessible solely through the main temple. Attached to the southeast of this sanctuary is a structure dubbed the mausoleum, also entered only from within the wall. As you can see from the photos of this site, this temple is far larger and grander than the temples at Baraqish. It's constructed of beautifully fitted limestone masonry. Its architectural decoration is extremely rich, with elements including staircases and paved floors. Several sections of the wall have a notable series of 64 false windows mimicking lattices, set into large, finely cut stones. Another highlight includes perfectly rounded surfaces topped with intricate ibex carvings, again, similar to the ones we saw in the temples in Baraqish, as well as the Temple of Yeha in Ethiopia, as covered in my prior episodes. In my view, these carvings are part of the original construction, and I believe a very important clue for re-evaluating the site's age. The floor of the main hall revealed 3 different layers, the lowest of which was reached via a large excavation pit and was made of basalt. No doubt these basalt basement stones belong to a much earlier phase. The so-called mausoleum at the rear of the complex also exhibits well-hewn stonework with deep, square chambers. The archaeologists interpret it as a tomb due to the pottery and bones found within the walls. But if you look at the reconstruction, it seems to me that this may have served another function beyond burial. It's clear that this site underwent various phases of repair and reconstruction, especially the wall. Some parts reached 30 feet high, with large mortarless stones, while others, particularly the irregular western end, show later reconstructions. So, how old is this site? The primary method for dating the Awwam Temple comes from the nearly 1,000 Sabaean inscriptions crediting rulers with its construction and repair. The earliest reference is 800 BC, setting the official date of the site. Keep in mind, the far smaller and less impressive site of Baraqish, just up the road from here, carbon dates to 1300 BC, which is 500 years earlier. The nearly 1,000 inscriptions form the largest and most important historic archive of ancient Yemen from the 8th century BC to the 3rd century AD. One really interesting fact is that in pre-Islamic Yemen, there are only 4 inscriptions relating to creation myths, and all of them were discovered at the Awwam Temple. Most inscriptions reference the god, Almaka, and from 8th century BC onward, it's clear that this site was utilized as a very important Sabaean temple. There were oracle shrines to Almaka found in the main hall, which the Sabaeans called the Oracle Temple. This area was restricted for the medium, through whom Almaka prophesied and the priests mediated. The shrine included incubation rooms, which is the practice of sleeping in a temple in order to receive dream-based oracles. Even military leaders used this space to consult oracles of war. Again, Almaka was represented by bull imagery. This imagery appeared in bronze statues on pedestals by the gates and was also found in altars and incense burners. In fact, over a dozen bulls made of marble and bronze were found in the temple and outside the temple walls. But what we don't see anywhere on the site are carvings of bull deities in any of the original stonework. Instead, we see distinctive Ibex motifs. Why is that the case? If this temple was originally constructed to worship Almaka, why don't we see bulls in the original architecture instead of ibexes? My research into Ibex iconography uncovered some interesting findings. The ibex first appears on pottery around 5200 BC in northern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq and Iran, where it is a dominant theme. One 1911 excavation yielded pottery that included 2 examples of fish, 3 of birds, but 13 ibex. Another excavation in 1931 yielded more images, shown in the bottom left example on the screen. The head archaeologist remarked, "The most popular animal was the ibex, which is found in all strata in much the same form. It is found extensively through this region from around 5200 to 3000 BC. Then after 3000 BC, the ibex begins to become far less prevalent on pottery and cylinder seals." There is some correlation in time period between the prevalence of ibex carvings and the prevalence of the mother goddess culture practiced by the Sumerian civilizations and their precursors, with the worship of goddesses like Inanna. But when the worship of the goddess gradually declined and gave way to the male deities that became dominant in the later Assyrian and Persian influence periods, you'll see much more dominant bull motifs represented and the gradual disappearance of the ibex motif. Of course, this doesn't provide any definitive proof regarding the dating of our site, but it does provide some food for thought. At any rate, I certainly believe that the site is older than 8th century BC. Relying only on inscriptions to date the site is not convincing, particularly when the location and quality of these inscriptions, compared to the original stonework on the site, is apparent. For example, look at the curved stone features with the false windows and ibexes. The inscriptions carved on the side of this otherwise unadorned feature describes 2 bull statues guarding the northwest gate. Another example, look at these larger alabaster panels that were propped up in front of the false window walls. Their craftsmanship pales in comparison. Even the bull and ibex carvings differ markedly in their quality. Might this site originate from an era when the ibex was a more prominent cultural figure, potentially thousands of years earlier than the bull-revering Sabaeans? It's certainly something to consider. But for now, let's move on to the smaller sister temple, the Barran Temple, located directly west of Awwam. The temple's most iconic feature is its 6 towering limestone columns, each over 12 meters or almost 40 feet high, topped with interesting geometric patterns. These columns are among the tallest in all of Yemen. The design of this temple is straightforward, constructed with large, precisely dressed limestone blocks in mortarless construction. I've included an artist's rendering of its possible original form. Archaeologists date this temple to the 7th to 5th centuries BC, making the assumption that this temple postdates Awwam's supposed 8th century BC origin. But is that the whole story? Earlier, I compared the temples of Baraqish to those found in Timna. At Barran, we see a similar limestone plaza, fronted by pillars and surrounded by columns. As we know, Timna's site overlays massive granite foundation stonework. If archaeologists were to excavate below the Barran temple, would they find something similar, and how could that reshape its timeline? Lastly, let's talk about the Old Marib Dam, one of antiquity's greatest engineering achievements. Situated west of the old city of Marib and the temples, the dam was primarily constructed using a combination of packed earth and dressed limestone blocks. The original structure stretched 600 meters long, 4 meters high, and 10 to 15 meters wide at its base. Try to grasp its magnitude. This ancient dam was equivalent to 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools placed end to end, as high as a house and as wide as a 3-lane highway. The dam featured 2 primary sluices, or water gates, at the north and south ends, constructed with stone to control water flow. In the rainy season, the floods that came down the valley came up against the dike and ran off along canals to the fields below. These sluices directed water into an extensive network of irrigation canals, which were all lined with stone, that distributed water across the Marib oasis. The sluices allowed precise regulation of floodwaters, preventing overflow and ensuring consistent irrigation for fields. The northern sluice was particularly elaborate, with stone-lined channels and control mechanisms to manage water release during heavy floods. This dam was phenomenally successful at transforming an arid desert into a lush oasis. At one time, the Marib oasis extended over 10,000 hectares, or 25,000 acres, nearly 2 times the size of the island of Manhattan, and was divided into 2 sections. As this map shows, the dam is on the west side of the oasis, highlighted in red. And you can see the old city of Marib and the Awwam and Barran temples highlighted in yellow. The vast gray areas on the map denote cultivated lands. Arab legends claim that the Marib oasis was a vast palm grove that took over 40 days to cross on horseback, without the rider ever exposed to the sun. How incredible to think about the ingenuity here. This ancient dam fundamentally transformed this entire region from aridity into a thriving and productive oasis. And its official dating? Around 800 BC, based on Sabaean inscriptions on sluice stones detailing building, repairs, and almaka dedications. Inscriptions note reconstruction in the 6th century BC and later, with significant upgrades in the 4th century BC and the 1st century AD. But after centuries or perhaps millennia of upkeep, the dam failed around 600 AD, causing the decline of Marib's agricultural dominance and contributing to the Sabaean kingdom's fall. Of course, as you may guess, I suspect that this dam is older than 800 BC. It would stand to reason that if the temples can be proven to be much older, the dam's dating would follow suit. But as I mentioned in my last episode, the devastating war in Yemen continues, has so far claimed over 150,000 lives, displaced 4.5 million people, and created a humanitarian crisis that has severely endangered Yemen's rich archaeological heritage. With just the sites we discussed today, both Baraqish and the Old Marib Dam have suffered major destruction during this conflict. This quote is directly from the final archaeological report at Baraqish. It ought not to be forgotten that during the current conflict in Yemen, which started in March of 2015, the Baraqish site was bombed by Saudi Arabia as the leader of a coalition formed to stop the Houthi advance in Yemen. Part of the city wall was destroyed, Temple A was virtually wiped out, and Temple B was severely damaged. Recent satellite images show that all that had been built by the Italian mission, including the storage rooms, the antiquarium, and the laboratory, is now just a pile of rubble and debris. And regarding the Old Marib Dam, UNESCO's Director General released a statement in May of 2015 announcing that the Great Dam of Marib had been damaged by the bomb. According to reports received, the ancient Sabaean inscriptions on the walls of the dam may also have been affected by the bombing. This announcement came just 1 week after the National Museum was completely destroyed. The museum contained some 12,500 ancient and irreplaceable artifacts. Again, I sincerely hope for peace in Yemen, both for its people and the preservation of its history. Sites like these deserve protection and preservation for future generations. I hope you enjoyed this short series on ancient Yemen. In my first episode, we discussed Timna, constructed on a 65-acre man-made mound and officially dated to the 4th century BC, despite its granite cyclopean walls. And today we covered Baraqish, Awwam, Barran, and the Old Marib Dam, with their curious Ibex carvings and granite basements. All of these sites have a great deal in common, and they all yield different but important clues that raise questions about their true antiquity. What are your thoughts? Is it possible these sites predate known Yemeni cultures? Let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate your support by subscribing to my channel and leaving me a review on your favorite platform. You can also follow me on Instagram, X, and Facebook at Secrets in Stone. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.